Hi, I'm Antonio Aakeel, and I play the gangster who opens a show and prepares the audience for what is coming. I think there is always more that needs to be done, to be quite honest with you, in all of these areas, when we're talking about supporting actors, supporting artists in this industry. Um, but I am seeing progress, so that makes me very, very hopeful. And I think another sort of adage to this is that when you are an actor and you're taking on a role that is quite sensitive, i.e., it can be triggering for others, it can be triggering to your own experiences in some way. I know with our script, we're talking about violence and particularly violence to trans people. Um, I think that you also have to, consciously be aware of what you're stepping into because you're about to engage with such material. And sometimes depending on your personal experience and just the way you are anyway, I don't think that you can always be prepared for what you're about to face in terms of material. And so you kind of have to know yourself, I think, quite well to know what you are willing to handle and what you're not. There are some projects, there are some scripts that I probably wouldn't have any interest in being a part of. Mostly. I mean, I don't think I've come across one yet that I've gone. Actually, no, I have once because it was incredibly. We're not going to talk about that. There's no point going into
It
the
was
script I didn't take.
it wasn't a role that was offering anything that you could really vibe with, perhaps.
It was just incredibly racist and ignorant, and it wasn't trying to combat that in any way. And so I can sort of perceive, um, the intellect, I suppose, of the piece before I engage with it and go, oh well, this isn't. This is thinking it's commenting on something. It's trying to, um, it's trying to be something that it isn't, and so I have no interest in that. Whereas I am again naturally interested in telling stories or being part of telling stories that can in some way inspire change. It's I think that we do there is so much about this industry that feels like you're navel gazing the entire time, that when a project comes along that could and potentially might have some impact in some way on either educating people or inspiring people or helping people feel seen, I think it's so important to get behind it if you can in any way. And that's why I was so passionate about this. I could see your passion. I could see everything that you loved about telling the story and sharing the story, and even the trigger warnings and the sensitivity of the piece that you sort of expressed to me before. I was like, yeah, I'm all in, because I think this could help. I've been acting professionally for about 10 years. I began in theatre in Birmingham, and then I moved into film and TV, and it's been going great. I would say that the majority of the projects I've been involved in have been like indie films or action series. So recently I was in an Apple series called Slow Horses with Gary Oldman, which is something I'm really, really proud of. A film that I'm really proud of is a film that I just finished called Sahela, which is about to release, which we shot it in Australia over the course of 3 months. And it's about the breakdown of a marriage between a man and his wife. And it was just an incredible opportunity. And being in Australia for that long was a real experience. I think my personal preference changes all the time. I think that it's always about a character that I'm going to get to embody. If the character is complex, if the journey is interesting, the medium doesn't really matter to me whether that's on stage or in film or on television, because for me the work is always the same. Yeah, I've been working as an actor professionally for about 10 years, and probably pursuing it for about 14, and so it is very competitive, as we're all aware. There doesn't ever seem to be enough work around for everybody. I know I've been fortunately blessed in that way, but I can't quite call it, to be honest. I feel like this is the artist's journey in many ways, that we just have to become used to the uncertainty of everything. And it's something that I've somehow grown accustomed to, which is such a weird thing to say, that when people ask me, what are you doing in a month's time or 2 months time, and I say, I don't know, we'll see. The fear that used to sort of accompany that has sort of dissipated now, because I'm just so accustomed to this lifestyle of being a freelancer.
So it is getting very exciting for you.
I
This
think so,
all
yeah.
that hard work is paying off.
Well, yeah, it's weird because you say that, and then you can go like nearly a year without a single job and feeling like you've fallen off the face of the earth, and then in the same year, like this year, I've landed two really good TV gigs back to back. and that's quite rare for me. You know, I just finished a Netflix series called Too Much, from one of my favorite writers, Lena Dunham, and getting to be directed by Lena, getting to work with Lena, in my very small, role there was incredible. And then I finished that and went straight onto Sherlock, and there was like I think 3 days break in between, and that's just so rare. And then you spend like a whole year out of work, so I can't be certain of like what the journey should look like or what the trajectory really is, because it just feels like it goes like this and then it stops and then it goes like this and,
Yeah.
and then it goes like this. So you can't call it. I think you just have to go, okay, this is what we're doing now. And if it didn't work out and if it all came crashing down, I'd just do something else. Yeah, I meditate daily, and I found that having a very strong spiritual practice grounds me when the outside world is so uncertain. So if I were to ever impart any wisdom, I would say do whatever you can to ground yourself as much as possible, because an industry like this in particular can honestly send you crazy. I've seen it time and time again with friends, etc. And building resilience, that's a really interesting thing that you mentioned there, only because I feel like resilience really is born out of rejection and failure and difficulty. And so now that I'm a decade into this experience, there are so many things I just don't hold on to like I would have before. um like, for example, if I have a meeting or do an audition or anything like that, I let it go. The second I walk out of that room, I've forgotten about it now. I don't even think about it. Even with my recent job, I got a call and my agent said, "You've got the job." And I went, "What job?" and he and I was like, "Which job are you talking about?" Because a month had passed since my meeting, so I'd forgotten about it completely. And I was like, "What job are you talking about?" And he was like, "Sherlock." And I was like, "What am I playing in that again?" Like, I literally deleted all memory of it, purposefully, I suppose, as a form of self-preservation. I think if I were to ever give advice to other creatives, I think even when it feels like it's not, nothing's happening for you, we always have to remember that, like, the good thing about being in an industry like this is that your life can change at any given moment. You can have a brilliant job or a brilliant opportunity come in at any given moment in your life. My best work could be in 30 years from now. That's amazing, isn't it? The potential of that I could be any age and still be an artist and create and do the best work of my ability at any time. I mean, I think there's just something so brilliant about that the potential always exists. It's ever present.
You have a fantastic perspective and attitude, which is, to be honest, how you ended up being on the coaching lesson. Because originally, I offered you a role which you accepted, but then along came the Sherlock fair dues. You couldn't really turn that one
Sorry.
down. That's all right. But you were so keen to be part of the project, and you were like, "Oh, I'll find a recording studio and I'll just do it because it's radio." And I was like, "It doesn't work with this because it's binaural, it's immersive, everybody's like live in a field." And it was so disappointing. But your enthusiasm was so infectious that when it came to thinking, how can I make the trigger warnings and information that we needed to set up the audio play more interesting and have it as a character? This one you can just find
Yeah.
a microphone and do. So, but if you hadn't had that enormous commitment and enthusiasm, I might not have immediately have thought of you. So so it does pay off in some ways. Um, but thank you so much for that, because
Yeah, that's
you,
very what I just really liked your passion and your energy for this project, and I liked the fact that you were doing something that felt very experimental and fresh. And I also think that it's really important to support people that have a vision. From my experience, I've noticed that in recent years there has been more support for actors when dealing with sensitive issues in the work, because I was playing a kidnappee in a show, and found that spending day after day inside a little cave with my hands tied behind my back and crying and being all emotional, that I was taking that home with me. And what was so fantastic about that experience was that I was able to be creative and step into that space to, play the character, but I was also offered support outside of work, i.e., through therapy and other things that I may have needed. So I do think that there is a raised sort of consciousness in that area now when it comes to protecting artists and protecting people in the workspace. And I don't think that's just segregated to the performance, industry or being an artist in our game. I think that we're seeing that across the board in many industries, where things like therapy are being offered as part of their work life experience. So personally, I think there has been great development in that area, and it's something I'm very, very keen to explore and take on when the chance is offered or when I feel it's necessary. Um, but I think it can only be a good thing because all we're trying to do really is just support our workforce. And I think that's amazing. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there when you said meet people where they are, because by large, the society that we live in has not had this experience nor been exposed to it. So it's going to be very, very hard for them to engage with something that's so alien to them if it's not presented to them in a way that you feel is palatable, at least initially.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're sort of trying to bridge the gap with our storytelling.
Mm.
And so, granted, that is that person's experience, and they think it's condescending, and you obviously have to hold space and respect that.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, you're coming from your perspective too,
Mm.
as somebody that was not familiar with this world and now is, and through that epiphany you're now creating art to hopefully bridge that gap for other people. So I think that this whole thing is so subjective that it's very, very hard to sit here and say, well, this is right and this is how you tell a
Mm.
story involving a minority audience. I don't think there's any right way. I think the most important thing is that we're all trying to engage with the conversation. That is what I care
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
I'm not a trans person. I have a couple of trans friends, and their experiences are so varied. But I'm not sitting here saying this is what a trans experience is and this is how it should be. That's not up to me to decide. I think if we can all just, try a little bit harder to listen to each other, maybe we can help move these issues forward and raise as much awareness as possible. And I always think it comes down to intention as well. Like, what is your
Yeah.
intention with this project? Because we are
Mm.
very sensitive as a society. And I feel like because we're becoming more and more aware of ourselves, I suppose, like, the collective consciousness is being raised, so much so that now we are aware of what our own triggers are. So I think it's important to express what could be sensitive to people, whereas 10 years ago we wouldn't be
No.
conscious of it. You would have an experience from watching something and not know why you felt a certain way, and
Mm.
now we've got the tools to really delve into why and who we are. And I think things like film are actually really helpful for reflecting that back to us. And I also think, for me, again, maybe it's because it's my world, but film can be very healing.
Yeah.
This
And
industry, art can be very healing. You listen to a story and it can help you. I think at large, people are thinking more inclusively these days. I think there's no doubt about that. Does there need to be more work in that area? Yes, of course. Um, but I think it's really tough for me to answer that personally, just because my experience has been a very good one across the board. And so it'd be very easy for me to sit here and say, no, diversity is moving forward. Like, I'm working a lot, like, it's great. But that's actually not the reality for the majority of my community. So I do think more work needs to be done. I think that I've experienced major growth from what I've observed, at least, only through the casting directors that I've met that have seemed to champion minority voices frequently. And I also think that from a writer's perspective, I think it's very important to be detailing a character's ethnicity should it be part of the storytelling. I don't think that we always need to have characters that are defined by their race, and I don't think that that should be the only way in which a minority gets a role, because then you're segregating yourself even further. So I think there just needs to be more of a balance, to be honest with you. And I think you ask, like, how do we change that, or how do we move that needle forward? And I think what's great is that there are so many minority actors taking on roles and being a part of productions where they're visibly seen, but their race is not necessarily a part of the storytelling, in the sense that it's not intrinsic to them being there. And that's what I've experienced, is that I'm playing characters now that are like, my character in Sherlock Holmes is called Timothy, and it's set in 1894 period London. So if we were going by those rules, I would not be there. So I definitely think that there is huge progress in this area. I just think we need to see more across the board. But I also think that there is some value in just being a part of it and just being present. I think me being in a show like this helps that conversation move forward. And I don't think that you need to then do any more than just the work, really.
Absolutely.
But I can't quite call it, because I'm also in a different place. So it's very, very hard to say, well, it's fine, it's moving forward, because you don't really know. I mean, ask 10 South Asian actors, ask somebody at the beginning of their career, ask somebody that is much further ahead than me, and then you get, like, you know, a real sort of eclectic idea of what that spectrum looks like. One thing I will say is I've never ever subscribed to the notion that my race or my identity has held me back in any way. Whether it has or not is irrelevant to my experience of it. And I think mindset is a huge component to any kind of success in life. There's going to be a gap between, you know, these incredibly well-educated people who understand everything about trans rights, etc., and then the people that just have no idea, no education on it, and there's this huge polarity.
And
We don't want that.
And it's getting bigger and bigger.
No, that's why projects like this, I think, are important, because I've never experienced anything immersive before. And I think part of my interest in this project was that it was something so different and experimental, and it's a story I've never heard of before. I think that's why people will engage with it, because it's so different. And at the same time, we're trying to educate people. I think it will be, appealing to a very specific audience, but I feel like it's going to be such an enjoyable experience.